DELMIAWorks runs this company that allows you to analyze where you are, see where you're going, and figure out what the path is that's going to get you there. Every step of the way through your production process is driving into the balance sheet and the profit and loss.
DELMIAWorks has helped us provide all the team members here, all the individuals within the business, with the best tools to give them the best chance to do the best job they can.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joe Pryweller, Director of Conference and Event Content for Plastics News. I want to welcome you to this session of Ask the Expert. These sessions are your chance to engage live with professionals on a range of topics and interact with questions. Today's Ask the Expert is sponsored by DELMIAWorks. Our expert today is Chris Smallwood, Vice President of Cloud Operations for DELMIAWorks. In this session, Chris will discuss business and cybersecurity benefits of cloud-hosted ERP systems. Chris will answer your questions after the presentation. To submit a question, email pnevents@crane.com, or if you're watching along on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, you can submit a question via those platforms. With that, I will turn things over to Chris Smallwood of DELMIAWorks. Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ask the Expert. I'm excited to talk to you today about two things that I'm very passionate about: manufacturing and security. Go ahead, next slide. As manufacturers are growing and scaling, it's really important to consider what challenges that you should watch out for, which we're going to talk about today. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and what I do for DELMIAWorks. I'll go over some security trends that all manufacturers should be aware of and how you might become a target for cyber criminals. I'll go over how cyber criminals get in and what you can do about it. Once you've seen the kinds of risks out there, I'll talk about how we can help, how DELMIAWorks can help your business not just survive, but really thrive during these challenging times. Finally, I'll open it up to Q&A. Next slide. The challenge. The reality is that cybercrime is on the rise year over year. And as businesses and owners and technology specialists, we're really tasked with a seemingly almost impossible goal of protecting the interest and integrity of our information security infrastructure. Protecting your trade secrets, your processes, your customer data, that secret sauce that makes your company unique needs to really be a top priority for any business, but manufacturers in particular. And this is the point of the conversation today. Next slide, please. So my name is Chris Smallwood, and again, I'm the VP of Cloud Operations here at DELMIAWorks. Like our customers, I love our ERP platform, which really only gets better if it's hosted in our cloud. My responsibility is to build, run, manage that cloud business. I've been in technology for over 2 decades, working with high-tech companies like NVIDIA, IBM, Johnson & Johnson, and among many others, solving critical business objectives through technology and relationship building. I have a variety of certifications and credentials around technology stacks and security, and I have a BA from University of Massachusetts at Amherst. Next slide. So, according to IBM Security X-Force, which these guys are really an industry leader in cybersecurity, we're seeing some really troubling shifts in cyber criminal activities and a retargeting that you really need to be aware of. So up until 2021, cyber criminals really focused most of their attention on the finance and insurance industries. They did this, let's face it, this is where the money is. The finance industry found themselves a target of ransomware attacks, and this really left serious impacts and scars. Fast forward to 2021, and what we saw, which is shown here in this chart, is the result of rapid improvement in cybersecurity posture from finance, which made it more difficult to extort those businesses. This really left cyber criminal organizations scrambling to find new targets for easy smash and grabs, which resulted in a refocus, unfortunately, on the manufacturing industry, which became the #1 target in 2021 and continues into 2022. This is why you should be concerned as manufacturers. But why the shift? Well, #1 is downtime intolerance. It became very clear that manufacturers are sensitive to downtime And as ransomware attacks are the #1 threat, this meant that manufacturers could not withstand the time needed to remediate against a ransomware attack. Think about what happened with the Colonial Pipeline and how disruptive supply chains attacks can be. Another thing you think about is immature security models. Manufacturers just aren't prioritizing security, which makes them more attractive to criminals. And as finance and insurance industries are refocusing, they're focusing their money and efforts on security, which makes them a less desirable target. The smaller you are, the more likely that you have deprioritized security, which then increase your risk substantially. I mean, IT in general has rarely been a priority for manufacturers, and cybersecurity even more so. Lastly, a lack of awareness and isolation. I would argue that just an overall general lack of awareness about global security trends is a big problem. This is why attending informational webinars like this one are important to surviving the upcoming year. It's easy to put the blinders on and focus on just on your business. So many companies today are just treading water when it comes to security. They don't have a sense of community and partnership with other companies like yours. That disconnect is holistically really a problem. As we know, if we don't know what each other is going through, then we don't really get those lessons learned for those who have survived a cybersecurity incident. Next slide. So we've seen a trend of manufacturers becoming a big target. Let's talk about how they're getting in. So phishing campaigns. In 2021, the #1 entry point was through these phishing campaigns. This is, what are we talking about? This is really around users opening malicious emails with attachments, enabling macros, and introducing unknowingly malware onto their computers, which then spreads laterally to other systems until they can find a domain administrator account to compromise, and then it's over. It spreads like wildfire. Phishing campaigns are 3 times more likely to be successful if those emails are followed up with a phone call. Ugh. Second, vulnerability exploitation. This is #2. This is previously #1, but we're #2 in 2021. This happens when either a zero-day exploits are released, or when systems are poorly patched and exploited and compromised as a result of a bad patch. Does Log4j ring a bell with anyone? If not, it should. Lastly, stolen credentials. This is still a problem today, and it's really around non-related ransomware or other attacks, getting credentials off the dark web, which are then used to compromise business systems. Administrators using the same passwords across multiple platforms are a big problem and can be very risky for any organization. It's not good. Next slide, please. Okay, that's a lot to think about, but it's not all doom and gloom. Though it is important to understand the risks that you're going to be facing as a manufacturer. First thing you're going to want to do is develop a ransomware plan. The last thing you want to do during a ransomware attack is to develop a plan when the incident is occurring and as it's unfolding. If you have to do this, you're going to be losing precious time building a plan instead of stopping or remediating against that attack. Get your business stakeholders, your IT engineers, and anyone critical to the business on board with how you're going to handle that attack and how you're going to deal with system isolation and deploying scripts or remediation in the event that you're attacked. Plan for it. Expect that it's going to happen and plan for it. Secondly, get your people some cybersecurity training. If the #1 point of entry is phishing campaigns, then your users are your weakest link in security. You have to train. We must train our users to be more cautious with emails and attachments, even from known senders. We frequently see when businesses are compromised that threat actors will even steal emails and then attack vendors of those customers or manufacturers with phishing campaigns and try to steal money or additional information. Look at gamifying the training any way you can. Make the training interesting and engaging to incur awareness. EDR, which is endpoint detection and response. Having a good EDR platform is critical. Look, antivirus is dead, people. If you're relying solely on AV, antivirus, to protect your organization, you need to seriously consider making a pivot to EDR of some kind. There's plenty of them out there. EDR is particularly good at handling zero-day exploits and other complex activities that you might see in an attack. EDR uses AI and behavioral analytics to look at what processes or users are doing and makes judgment calls on malicious behavior. The key is our ability to protect against modern malware. EDR does this. MFA, or multi-factor authentication, is a great mitigation technique. Using MFA anywhere that you can is recommended. There are many providers of MFA out there that integrate with most technology stacks and can do so at very low cost. If admin credentials are compromised, MFA could potentially save your organization from full compromission by requiring additional layers of authentication. Building partnerships. This goes back to what I was saying earlier when we opened up the talk. Talk with your fellow manufacturers, share intel and experiences, and grow our overall awareness and preparedness. They're doing it. The cyber criminals out there, they're sharing intel with each other about many manufacturers, maybe even potentially your business. So it's important that you're doing the same. I have on multiple occasions shared threat intel with our customers to advise them of potential points of concern. When their name pops up on a dark web, we will often see it and can share that intel in an effort to help those businesses. Be a good business partner. Lastly, host your solutions with a trusted vendor. Make sure that the things that we're talking about today, your vendors are doing as well. Challenge them, ask them questions. Make sure that for whatever you need hosted, that you're partnering with a reputable, transparent service provider. Next slide. Let me tell you about the DELMIAWorks Hosted Managed Services, or HMS, offering. As an MSP managed service provider, we offer full ERP hosting in our secure, scalable, and resilient cloud. We're going to offer a high level of security, which I'll cover more in more detail in a minute. We're going to reduce your overall cost of running the ERP. I have another webinar in which I talk about all the hidden costs of running ERP on premise. I've been doing this for a very long time, decades, and I know that there's a lot of costs involved with running on-premise, electrical, AC, cooling, backup power, etc. We can run the ERP less expensive than we can on-premise. We will improve the overall system and software performance through clever automation, along with leveraging years of experience hosting the ERP. We've been doing this since 2015, so we're as old as the cloud itself. We know all the tricks and methods to make the ERP hum. Keeping the businesses up and online at all times is our goal. Many of our customers are 24/7 and can't tolerate downtime. We talked about this earlier. Manufacturers just overall cannot tolerate downtime. We promise 99.5 uptime SLA, with our actual sitting around 99.99, and some of our customers are seeing a 100% uptime quarter over quarter. That's incredible. Lastly, we handle all infrastructure upgrades, meaning that when you need to upgrade the software, we take the complexity out of it and let you focus on running your business. Next slide, please. I'm excited to talk to you about our web service. We're leveraging cutting-edge web technology from Microsoft to deliver the entirety of the software through an HTML5 experience. This means you can run our software on any device, whether it is iOS, Windows, tablet, etc. As long as it has a browser, you're all set. We want to support flexibility in where you're working from. And so whether it's a coffee shop or a conference room, you'll be able to securely access the software. Next slide. So why should you trust us? The HMS service leverages state-of-the-art EDR, which means that our security stack is up for the challenge. We have a 24/7 security operations center to keep a watchful eye on security. So even while you're sleeping, we're making sure your data is protected. We perform both weekly vulnerability scanning and annual external penetration testing to make sure that our security postures and methodologies aren't just good on paper, they're good in practice, and we prove that. We offer MFA as well. So if as we talked earlier about MFA, you should be considering this as part of the service. SIEM, which is the Security Information Event Management. This is coming in 2022. I'm excited about that. So stay tuned for that. Lastly, security controls are important, and much of our stack is controlled by these standards. Next slide. And I appreciate the time talking with you today. I hope this has been a lot. I've covered quite a bit, but I'd be happy to take some questions and go through some of your concerns.
Terrific, Chris. Thanks for a great presentation. Appreciate the
Yeah.
overview and the look at this. And as we discussed before, a lot of companies haven't considered this to a great extent as they should, or made a priority where they should do that kind of thing. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, do so by emailing pnevents@crane.com, and we'll get you a question in the order that it is received. Or if you're watching along on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, any social media sites, you can send your questions in through those platforms. So feel free to ask questions. Here's the first one that came in. Chris, talking about EDR, endpoint detection and response. I'm sure it's not free. It costs some money to do anyway. How do you suggest that that a company propose EDR as a must-have within the organization?
Yeah, it's a good question, Joe. Thank you. Like I mentioned before, antivirus is dead. Businesses, I don't think anybody should be running antivirus anymore. Endpoint detection response has to be the baseline for your security stack, your security infrastructure. How do you pitch that to your business? When it comes down to it, ransomware attacks can be incredibly impactful to manufacturers and really any kind of business. And it can destroy those businesses. It can bring them to their knees. It can take you out of production for days, weeks, months, or longer. And you really have to think about it and say, is it worth it to me to spare a couple of dollars, to not purchase EDR, or is it important for me to keep my business up and running so that I can continue to make parts and make profits, right? So really, the thing you're going to want to do is really just take a hard look at the costs. Get those EDR solutions quoted out. They're not cheap, like Joe mentioned, but they're worth every single penny.
Well, I guess a question I have is, how do you differentiate between EDR and antivirus protection? Why is it so much better to use one instead of the other?
Yeah, great question. So without getting into the gory details, antivirus really, traditional antivirus is based upon heuristical file analysis. So it's very rigid. It's almost like a recipe. Antivirus has a recipe to look at. If the threat actor malware does X, then the antivirus, if it knows about it, is going to do Y. But what happens if the antivirus doesn't know about this threat? What happens if it's new? It's a 0-day. You probably hear this a lot. 0-day attack. The threat it just came out. How is the antivirus going to know about it? A lot of times it doesn't, and so it slips by. EDR is different in the sense that it uses AI, artificial intelligence, to drive behavioral analytics. And so it looks at the behaviors. It doesn't just look at a cookbook of recipes of what it knows about. It looks at the behavior. If the behavior is malicious or suspicious, it's going to flag it. And they tend to do a very, very good job, especially with 0-day attacks.
Excellent. Well, that makes sense. I know even with my personal computer, I have to be updating my antivirus all the time, right? There's always new threats out there. And
absolutely,
analyze behavior makes a big difference. You talked a little bit about the HMR service that DELMIAWorks offers. How can that help protect a business?
Yeah, so coming into HMS, how we're going to protect the business is, if you recall from that why you should trust us slide, we really dive into kind of the details of what we offer from a security standpoint. And I like this slide because it really clearly articulates our posture. How serious are we about security? We're very serious. We become the custodians of our customers' data. So it's very important to us that we have good, sound cybersecurity policies, frameworks, and infrastructure and technology to protect that data for that customer. And we do it a lot of times so the customers don't have to do this themselves. The customer can focus on running their business, making products and making profits, right? I don't want them worried about how the software works or how it's operated or how it's secured. I want them to just really be focused on making their business successful. And this is what we bring to the table.
So it takes out the worry, and I don't have to be an IT expert
That's exactly
in
right.
order to use this. I can rely on somebody else to do this and do this. And you mentioned a real multi-pronged approach with it too, which is great. Help.
Well, that's a good point, Joe. I mean, really, this is the reality of the situation. Maybe it's not. It's a little bit of an ugly truth, but manufacturers just don't want to spend the. They don't have the appetite to spend time on IT and security. They just don't. And so, if they don't, they need to. But if they can't, then they've got to make sure that they have trusted vendors, like I mentioned earlier, available to them that they can rely on to do those things for them, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, this is why we're here.
Definitely. You talked a little bit about threat intelligence, which is
Mhm.
a big term anyway. Can you tell more about how threat intelligence works, and is it
Yeah.
that useful? Can you talk a little more about that? Maybe you'll provide a little more detail.
Yeah. So EDR, endpoint detection and response, a lot of EDR solutions have and it's not just tied with EDR, but this is just in the frame of this conversation. There, you could potentially rely on threat intelligence services from those EDR companies. And what is threat intelligence? It sounds kind of scary, but it's a really good thing for us because, you know, those cyber criminals are building they're building intelligence against our manufacturing businesses. They're doing it every day. They're gathering information on social media. They're gathering information about the users and the workers, and potentially about security posture of an organization that they want to attack. Well, guess what? That doesn't work for me. I don't feel comfortable with that. So what are we going to do in response to that? We built our own, we as a community, a large community, built our own threat intelligence system, through companies like CrowdStrike and many other companies out there that are providing threat intelligence services. And what they do is they scour the dark web. They are keeping track of hacker groups. They're building information so that they can help us as consumers of their products protect our businesses better. So we're going to learn about the threat actors out there, and that's what that threat intelligence is really about.
Okay, great. Here's a question. Can you share any stories about businesses that you've helped in the past recover from cyber attacks? Has that been a problem even for, small, mid-sized businesses anyway?
Mhm. It's interesting. I think that it's funny because I talked about this earlier. Um, you know, Maybe I won't go into a lot of detail, but I will say that there have been plenty of instances over my last 25 years that I've leveraged threat intelligence to to help businesses that aren't even aware that their information may be out there on the dark web. I mean, it's hard to say if you don't have threat intelligence running, you don't know what's out there, right? You need a service that scrapes that data. I don't have time to go out there to do it myself. We use threat intelligence services, right? So we've, on many instances, have alerted customers over the last 25 years, both at DELMIAWorks and prior companies that I've been with. Um, when they were not even aware that their stuff's out there, guess what's going on? You've got users that maybe you have one of your office workers had a ransomware attack on their home computer, right? We're not going to know about that, but guess what? Their information is out on the dark web now, being sold to the highest bidder, and that information might help a threat actor gain access to your business. This is a reality, and we have seen this many times, and we've helped to mitigate or stop attacks because of this threat intelligence, for sure.
That's interesting. Yeah, so you can't always protect about what a personal computer might do and what happens at home. Yeah, I was going to ask you too about that. How do you protect it? You get stolen passwords and credentials as part of what you mentioned too. Does that
Yeah,
happen in the business place too, as well as
yeah.
in your personal space?
Yeah, absolutely. This is what I mentioned this earlier, which is, administrators, IT administrators, if they're not good about how they're handling their passwords, having multiple passwords isn't fun, but you've got to do it. Not having the same password in more than one website or service is incredibly important. I've seen many administrators over the years use the same password for everything that they do, whether it is their home banking, Amazon, all of their business infrastructure accounts. And guess what? if their machine becomes compromised, their home machine becomes compromised with ransomware, and those credentials get scraped and sold on the dark web, those threat actors now have the ability to use that to get into businesses with that information. And so by leveraging things like endpoint detection response and multi-factor authentication, MFA is a really good mitigation tool. What it does is that if somebody were to steal credentials and they try to log in, it's going to send basically like a request to a cell phone or maybe even an email address or a call or whatever. Uh, and and those mitigation factors really make a big difference on that threat actor being able to get in. That might stop them cold in their tracks. If they don't have the admin's phone in their hand, they may not be able to get in at all, even if they do have their username and password. So MFA is very important.
So that's similar to the two-step verification process I might go through for when I set up my personal accounts also. Is that similar to that?
That's exactly what it is. Yeah. 2FA or MFA are exactly the same things. It's another layer of authentication. It's not just username and password. It's username and password plus something else, email, text message, whatever.
Great. So. You said also that the manufacturing sector has been the number one target. And this question is going to give more details on that trend, why manufacturing is so vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on it earlier, but I think the reality, I think it's really just it's the fact that the finance industry and the insurance industry, which were the highest previous, they were the most attacked previously, they figured that out. And that was where the money was, and so that they were a big target. And so once they sophisticated their systems and hardened their systems against cyber criminal attacks, it really left a kind of a gap. And manufacturers, like I mentioned earlier, Colonial Pipeline, when we saw, that ransomware attack hit the Colonial Pipeline and the amount of disruption that caused, and that's huge, right? And so manufacturers across the United States are feeling it. They can't tolerate this downtime. And those criminals, the cyber criminals, they know they can't tolerate downtime. And so, a combination of those things with like I said, a less sophisticated approach to IT and information security from a manufacturing standpoint. That's a recipe for disaster as far as I'm concerned.
And I imagine as they're getting more into automation and ERP systems and other things too, does that add more potential vulnerability if you're not protected?
Yeah, if you're not careful, for sure. Yeah, you have to be careful with who you're hosting with, and you have to make sure that the solutions and the software that you're using out there, we take this for granted. We take security for granted. We sign up for services online all the time, whether it's with a business or not. And we just assume that their security is good. We assume that our data is safe with those businesses. But you have to know. It's my recommendation that you ask, that you prod, that you check. There's plenty of big name services out there, like SolarWinds, for example, big high tech company. Was compromised and a lot of data was stolen, and it's, we look at those guys at SolarWinds and we're like, wow, those guys are huge. They should have their stuff together. No, it's not always the case.
Do you recommend certain training for these companies too? Besides using your HMS system, as a security professional, do you recommend any training that folks should do?
I mean, overall, it's hard to prioritize this because I know, cybersecurity training isn't always the most exciting, and I know that your people or users might look at that and go, "Oh, not this again," right? But it's so important. Those may be the same users that click and open up attachments and then spread malware, right? So you've got to make it interesting. You've got to make it engaging. You've got to gamify it, right? This is a new thing that's coming across in training these days, which is to gamify it, to make it interactive, right? That's what I mean by gamify. It's to make it interactive. Create scenarios, create circumstances, and test those users with this training. It can be really helpful to help drive adoption of security policies and of that training.
Excellent. Well, Chris, do you have any final parting comments that you want to leave the audience with before we end the Ask the Expert today?
I hope that I do again really appreciate the time. Plastics News is awesome. I appreciate the time speaking with you all today. I hope this has been informational and if you have any other questions, my contact information is listed here, whether it's around the DELMIAWorks product or the DELMIAWorks hosted product. I'd be happy to help you or get you in touch with the right person. And I think that's it.
Excellent. Well, Chris, I want to thank you, and I want to thank DELMIAWorks for sponsoring this Ask the Expert today. Very interesting topic, and one that should be a high priority among many in the plastics manufacturing world for sure. And I want to mention too, today's Ask the Expert will also be available for viewing on the events section of Plastics News website, so you can review that there. I'm Joe Pryweller with Plastics News. Thanks again for joining us at today's Ask the Expert, and thanks again to DELMIAWorks for sponsoring this session. Here's a final word from our sponsors before we go. Thank you.
DELMIAWorks runs this company that allows you to analyze where you are, see where you're going, and figure out what the path is that's going to get you there. Every step of the way through your production process is driving into the balance sheet and the profit and loss.
DELMIAWorks has helped us provide all the team members here, all the individuals within the business, with the best tools to give them the best chance to do the best job they can.